Hello, everybody. As usual, give me a little bit of a sound off and let me know that everybody can see me and hear me just fine. This also helps give me a little bit of an idea about the delay between when I speak and when you guys hear me. So sound off, let me know you can hear and see. All right, good. Looks like everybody can hear me and see me fine. So what we're doing today is a kind of by request workshop on elementals, nature spirits. And it's not one of those things that we often cover a lot in terms of the normal actual curriculum, partly because, especially earlier in the path, it can be very distracting. It can kind of side rail you into the level of psychic phenomenon, and it is especially kind of almost dangerous even for the imagination in the earlier stages on the spiritual path. So, for example, a lot of people, when they first start to join, imagine that they're having what might be called beginner's luck or past life unfoldments. And sometimes this is true. Sometimes something of that sort is happening. But oftentimes, what's actually happening is that the imagination has become energized by some of the spiritual practices and is now being directed in certain ways to kind of manifest their wishes and desires about what could happen to them or what is happening to them. And this is when somebody who, sits and does spiritual practice for 5 days thinks they have a Kundalini awakening. And it's not entirely different from when somebody does drugs, hallucinogens, and thinks that they see God and angels and the likes. Just like hallucinogens and narcotics can open the pathways, the dream pathways in the brain, and produce very convincing images. Spiritual meditation in the outer channels, when we first get going, can direct energy into certain channels that are similar to clairvoyance, but more akin to dreaming, and can create some waking hallucinations, or can simply energize the imagination. There are a lot of people who say, well, I saw this, or I saw that, or I saw an archangel, for example. And that's how they would tell the story, is I saw with my eyes an archangel. But actually, in the moment, if they were being honest with themselves, they didn't see an archangel. They received the mental impression of an archangel for who knows what reasons. Maybe there was a spiritual being present. And I mean, it's not as though you know the faces of all 7 of the archangels by heart, right? All you have are artist renditions of them. So you see an angel, the ego assumes archangel, because if they're visiting me, it must be an archangel, or it must be some god, or a great rishi. It can't just be some dead person or a hungry ghost or a spirit that just looks like a person and a little shiny in a robe or something, right? All of that gets immediately ruled out. If they're visiting me, it must be an archangel, right? So then the mind projects archangel. But in reality, there was probably just an impression of some kind of presence in the room with them. Mind got energized with fantasy and imagination and projected the thought archangel. And they never saw anything or heard anything with their eyes or ears. But when they tell the story later on, they saw an archangel and it talked to them, right? This is the nature of the imagination. It's a very tricky creature. So for reasons like this, we don't go too far into talking about the, I guess you could call it the astral politics, and the populations of the psychic realms. And psychic realms are the realms of form, the realms in which the five senses are still active, and there are colors and there's differentiation. Otherness really becomes a phenomenon on the level of the psychic realms. So we don't go a whole lot into that a lot of times. Many teachers in many different paths, this isn't something unique to TDS or to me or anything like that. Oftentimes, most teachers don't go too far into the spirit life with people who haven't learned how to discern what's real and what's not, people in whom the psychic faculties are not yet fully active, or people in whom the imagination or fantasy is still too strong. Until the mind is quiet, until the mind can sit silently, it can be very difficult for it to be a good barometer of what's really happening, right? This is one of the virtues of cultivating the psychic faculties, is actually that they make things a little bit more objective. And so, for example, once you activate your clairvoyance, if you don't physically see something, you don't really get distracted by the thought, I think there's something here, right? But if you can't see, then you're stuck thinking there's something here, like at night, and it's solid black and you hear a rustle, and you don't know if it was just wind current or a bug or a poisonous snake, right? Because if it's a snake, it's going to be a poisonous snake. And if it's a spider, it must be the most poisonous spider, or some kind of disease-bearing rodent, instead of just a little wind current sweeping through wherever it is you're sleeping. So with that same kind of mentality, when we don't have the psychic faculties, then when we get an impression or we feel a change in a room, our minds immediately jump to some pretty wild conclusions. And it's normally one extreme or the other. It's normally either demons and the devil, or it's gods and Jesus and archangels. And our egos don't allow us to have a lot of room in between. Sometimes it's something quite innocuous, right? Sometimes it's a deceased family member. Many people have a ancestral protector in their family, right? For me, it's my great-grandmother, for example. So many people have a kind of ancestral protector in their family, somebody very invested in their family line, who usually in life had a patriarchal or matriarchal relationship to the rest of the family. Like whatever they said goes, or they were always the deciding vote whenever something was happening. The family always took counsel with them, or they were kind of the emotional or psychological linchpin, or even just the financial linchpin of the family. Most people have something like that. It could just be one of those types of beings coming to visit you. It could have been nothing at all. It could have been an atmospheric change caused by humidity or weather, or by a gust of cold wind. It could have been a draft. It could have been a bug, right? So until the psychic faculties are fully developed, it can be quite hard to trust these things, because it's easy to walk around imagining that every little impression we get is correct. But that's not true in normal life. It's not true with your thoughts. Every little impression you get about how something might go doesn't turn out that way. Every single impression you get about a person isn't always correct, and your opinion on a matter isn't always correct. So then why assume that every subtle, mistakable psychic impression, that you interpret it correctly, right? When oftentimes we don't. So this is kind of an important, sobering understanding to have when we're starting out with working with spirit beings, nature spirits, elementals, planetary beings, ancestors, ghosts, whatever the case might be. An important thing to remember is to just soberly be aware of the extent of your connection to those realms. If for some people are very naturally psychic. Some people have that phenomenon. Some people are born with certain psychic faculties, right? If you have a little bit more going for you in that regards, then that's fine. That's something you get to be aware of and factor in. But if you don't, then just be sober about it and be aware that there's going to be a learning curve. And if you know that you can't correctly interpret everything that happens, don't always try to. Just sometimes it's enough, you make an offering to the nature spirits or something, and the wind kicks up out of nowhere, and there's kind of a pleasant aroma or something in the wind. Does it mean a bunch of nature spirits came and took your offering? No. Does it mean your wish was granted? No. Does it mean you were forgiven for whatever you were asking? Nope. But it might. So these are the kinds of mindsets we have to be in. We just have to soberly accept the reality of where we're at, right? Just like how you spend a long time talking to God before you finally see God. It can be a bit of a less long learning curve, but it can still be quite a bit of a process of speaking to these beings before they show themselves to you. And that applies to any type of being, because you have to carve out the channels of communication between you and them. Everybody knows about our internal energy channels, but we have a lot of external energy channels also. And these things are channels of communication between us and other people, between us and spirit beings of the past, present, and future, us in different segments of time, different levels of reality. Right? So we have these kinds of different things. We just need to be soberly aware of them. And by practice, we can carve out these channels and clean them and open them up so that information comes through and we find ourselves able to communicate effectively and in time able to see. A very large part of opening up the magical faculties, the faculties of truth, which are clairvoyance, clairaudience, and clairsentience, a very important part of opening those up is retraining the mind to accept them, is retraining the mind to accept that these things happen. And even more so, and perhaps an equally important thing, not just that they happen, but that they can happen to you. A lot of people walk the spiritual path just assuming that certain things will never happen to them. I've met many different people who tell me things. I've met many people who even are enlightened to one degree or another, very advanced meditators, who will tell me things like, oh, well, I'm not Milarepa, so something like that couldn't happen to me. I'm not Padmasambhava, so something like that couldn't happen to me. I'm not my guru, whoever their guru was, so something like that couldn't happen to me. I'm not the guru or the teacher, so something like this surely can't happen to somebody like me. I'm not, there's all these mantras of I'm not. All these mantras of I'm not, I'm not, I'm not, I'm not. There's a powerful verse in one of the old Gitas. It's kind of like it's part of the Advaita Vedanta non-dual reality sect of yoga. And there's an important verse that says, "It is your bondage, O my son, that you meditate." And this isn't meant to convey at all that a person shouldn't meditate. But the master in this particular instance is speaking to his disciple, says, "It's your bondage, O my son, that you meditate." He's saying that because many people meditate with the idea that they'll never reach the end, they're so caught up on the practicing that they never think about the fruit. And they always assume, that an infinite ocean of practice remains between them and whatever their goal is. And that's not always the case. You may already be open enough and psychically and energetically available enough for spirit beings like nature spirits and planetary beings or ancestral beings or lineage masters to communicate with you. But because you conscientiously shut off the possibility of that experience, it doesn't happen. You don't open yourself to it. We see this in our normal lives too. You could be best friends with somebody, but you refuse to be best friends with them, right? Because it's just in your mind. You just don't let that pathway open. So it doesn't open. You could go to town and do something all day or not. You could become a great meditator or a great magician if you sat and practiced every day, but you refuse to, and so you don't. You conscientiously shut off that path in life. You conscientiously shut off those experiences. So we do the same thing energetically and on a psychic level. Anything that seems real or has a real effect in this realm has a real cause in another realm. And things that seem real in this realm but that are insubstantial, like that concept of shutting something off by making a choice, we don't often think of that. But we do it constantly in daily life. So if it's real and it happens in daily life, it definitely happens psychically and astrally. In fact, things that are very subtle like that, that kind of concept, are even more real on a astral level, on the level of mind and energy. So if you don't open yourself up to the possibility that these beings not only exist, I mean, many of you are here, if you're watching this video, you probably assume that these beings exist. You have faith that they exist. You may have even had small encounters with them, but you refuse to accept that it could be a part of your life because you keep postponing that for some plateau that you may or may not ever reach. Right? You keep pushing it on and on and on, and you never accept that you could start doing it now. You could connect to those things now. I mean, what's the worst that can happen, right? Nothing. The worst that can happen is literally nothing. Nothing happens. You make some offerings, you try to talk to some spirits, nothing happens. Okay, well, now you have your answer. Not ready yet. Later, something will happen. Also, some people have a lot of psychic karma with these beings. If you've done a lot of magic, or if you've done, especially if you've done a lot of nature-based shamanism or priesthoods in past lives, your soul will naturally kind of reopen those old doors and those old channels in your body much easier because it's already walked those paths before. And it may even have lingering familiars, which are kind of assistant spirits. It could have familiars, it could even have friendships among some of the spirits in different spheres and elements of reality that may even be waiting to talk to you. You may have beings literally lined up, waiting to have a conversation with you and catch up, but you keep the door closed. Or you don't know how to begin the process of opening it for communication. So opening that door for communication isn't very difficult. Like I said, one of the main things it requires is just accepting that you can live a magical life and that it can happen for you. So if you accept those two things, that you can live a magical life, you can be a magician, which involves, living a magical life inherently involves these sorts of things. If you accept that you do that, and you accept that things like this can happen to you, then it can work. Right? Many of you are already several years into your training, and even if you've not done excellently in those years, you've probably still made enough progress to see some success with certain magical acts like communicating with spirits. And I encourage it. I encourage doing things like this because it's a way to bring the magical into the mundane. A very important part of the path, especially in a more magically or ritually based path, is transforming the mundane into the spiritual. Right? So transforming the mundane into the magical. So if you look out across a vast field or forest, or you sit by a river and you hear the water running by and you see all the green trees, and all you see is the mundane level, and all it is to you is just a mundane, meaningless river and a mundane, meaningless forest, and you're sitting on a mundane, meaningless rock, then you're stuck in this world. You're frozen. Your heart isn't warm enough. You're refusing to build or to see the connection between this realm and other realms. Everything is right here. Nothing is far away. Everything is right here. All those different realms are right here. Right? Nature spirits are right here. Right? I was sleeping right there, which is behind the computer. I was sleeping right on my bed the other night. And I wasn't asleep. I was having some trouble. I was tossing, turning a little bit. And I would put my eyes and there's just some genie-looking Arabic type spirit. It must be associated from a past life or something, because this definitely isn't his region. Just floating on a little cloud. He had the golden curly shoes and the little red turban on, and golden bangles. And he's just sitting there floating at the same level as my bed, laying on the opposite side of me, kind of looking at me. And I kind of, waved at him. And he smiled and did a little wave back, and then just slowly he went into the wall and vanished. Right? But that happened right here. I didn't go astrally travel somewhere. That happened right here, because the astral plane is right here. The mental plane, the causal plane, the gods, the Buddhas, the masters, they're all right here. Okay? They're not way over there. They're not at the end of some distant plateau. They're not hopelessly far away. It's not a matter of whether or not they hear you or see you. Everything's happening right here. All the realms overlap each other. Right? It's not like a series of flat disks. It's a sphere, it's a holographic sphere. Everything overlaps everything else. Kind of like radio waves, right? Radio waves are permeating the air. If you have a radio receiver, you can sit and listen to all the different radio waves moving through right here, this spot of air. You could connect to all of them. But the frequency of your receiver is what decides which one you're seeing. So same thing with us. It's our frequency, our vibratory rate of the mind, the energy, and the body all together is the collective vibratory rate is our frequency. And if we're always tuned way down, we're only getting this one kind of mundane station. But if we turn ourselves up through practice and proper mind training and being open to the possibility of these experiences, then we can tune into some other stations, so to say, and see what's going on over there. Right? Not over there, but literally right here, just at a different frequency. You can see it all. So all those things are happening right here. And that's, to me, that's one of the most important, or I guess one of the neatest components of working with nature spirits, is because it's a very good stepping stone. It's a very good rung on the ladder for having this realization. Because when we think of nature spirits, even if I say elementals, you'll think of fire spirit in some fiery place somewhere far away from you, right? You can't help it. That's a wrong point of view, but you can't help think that because I said fire elementals. But if I say nature spirit, this evokes this idea that hiding under that rock over there, or up in that tree right next to me, or in a tunnel below the ground right where I'm standing, there's a sentient spiritual being. And so it helps bring the spiritual world, the world that magicians live in, it helps bring it from way over there to right here. And it helps, it's a very important and very useful stepping stone in spiritualizing your mundane life, in spiritualizing your reality. So if you take those steps and you spiritualize your reality in that way, then everything that's right here will start to open up and communicate with you. Suddenly the river doesn't just become a mundane river. It becomes the flowing, silky body of a spiritual being whose consciousness permeates every atom of every water molecule that runs through it, who holds and embraces every single living creature in it. And if you access that, if you realize that, you can connect to it. And if you connect to it, it can speak with you. You know, funny things can happen that way. I went down, some people who were my students years ago might remember, but I went down to the this river in Florida one night. It was full moon night, which is always, full moon night is always a good time to work with nature spirits, because kind of like humans, nature spirits have their own holidays, you could say, and theirs are governed by the moon, just like humans used to be. Theirs are governed largely by the moon. So full moon is always kind of a party time. And at night, the energy is very saturated still with solar energy, which is the kind of energy we're used to interacting with more. We're more solar creatures. So it helps us see these beings a little bit more, a little more easily on full moons. So I went down to the river, and I'm not saying this to boast or brag. This is a tiny, tiny little thing. that means nothing. It's any magician can go do it. This isn't some special thing. I'm just sharing it to say that, like, this is an example of what you can go do. So I went down to this river that was near where we were living at the time. It was kind of the first one of the student houses that we went through before kind of finally landing in Melrose where we were. And it was near this river and a spring. And so I went down full moon night and waded into the spring, and the spring connected to the river. And it was very native, I guess you could say. It was very wild, right? There was a man-made kind of boardwalk around the spring, but otherwise it was vast woods. And I did prayers, and I brought some incense and things like that, and I lit it and made offerings to the spirit of the river, because we had all just moved there, with the exception of Bridget, of course, who grew up on this river. And I asked if I could communicate with the lady of the river. And this isn't always the case, but oftentimes the spiritual lord of a body of water is female, right? One of the only times that isn't the case that I've seen is glacial lakes and mountains tend to be personified as male spirits. But almost every other body of water I've seen is personified or chooses to present itself as female. And that's kind of an important thing to remember with this, is a lot of these energies, they're not male or female. It's how they're choosing to present themselves. It's a way that's mathematically representative of the nature of their energies. It's a matter of physics, right? Symbolism is a very real, concrete thing on an astral level. It's not nonchalant. It has a lot of meaning. So I went down to the river and I made my offerings and did some traditional prayers and stuff. And I asked the lady of the river to appear to me. And right as I did this, right where the river, right where the spring feeds into the river, a alligator rose up out of the water, kind of like this. And I saw his eyes and his back. He was a big alligator. And it's unusual for an alligator to be on this particular river because it stays fairly cold. And in the moonlight, I could see that there was a bat swirling in circles above the alligator. And clairvoyantly, energetically, I could tell that this bat was flying in circles around a figure that was standing on the back of the alligator. And the alligator was maybe 10 feet from me. 10 feet from me, and it looked to be about 7 or 8 feet long. It was a big alligator. They came up, and I stood my ground, right, because courage is an important thing in both life and magic. And I made my offerings, and I dipped the incense, I lit the incense tips and dipped them into the water as an offering, right, to give her the scent and the smoke and everything. And I asked just for protection. You know, I said me and my people close to me are going to be frequenting this spring and this river, and I know there's poisonous snakes and there's alligators, and some people are just silly and don't know. Maybe they don't know how to swim that well, or they do something stupid or whatever, you know. So I said, just please extend your protection to us. And I saw a nod, and the bat flew off, and the alligator went back into the water. So little things like this are very classic. This used to be in other times and different times, and in what are considered old world countries that still exist today, third world countries people call them. I consider them old world countries. Things like that are still quite common, where when a magician goes to a new land or new place, one of the first lines of business is familiarizing yourself with the nature spirits of that region, right? Nature spirits don't move around. They're bound by region. Right? Just like how finding people who constantly move from place to place and roam everywhere is quite rare. Most people find a spot that connects to them and stay there. Same thing with nature spirits. Many of them, they have a certain energetic type that connects to a certain exact region of a certain kind of geography, a certain kind of ecosystem and habitat, and they stay there and don't really roam. So when you come into a new place, one of the first courses of business is connecting to and trying to get to know, build a connection to the nature spirits who are there. And in this way, one of the traditional things we do is ask for protection, right, on the course of the land, because nature spirits control all these other things. Energy flows top to bottom. So there's nature spirits that control all the animals of an area, the weather of an area, all these sorts of things. So if you can gain their friendship and respect, they'll extend protection. So this was a very traditional thing to do. So kind of intro-wise, that about covers some of the basic ideas I wanted to sum up. And what we'll do now is a short Q&A, where some of you look like have already asked some questions. Let me see. All right, so what we're going to do is a short Q&A, and then we'll do a short break, 5-minute break or something like that, just so I can get some water. So if you have some questions about what we've talked about so far, and then go ahead and ask them in the live chat on the YouTube channel. And I'll read them out and answer them so that everybody can benefit. And if I already see a question, I'll answer it. Tony asked, is it common to set familiar beings tasks for your next life? Like to remind you of certain things or communicate certain things? You know, it's funny that is something every magician has the power to do, and very, very few ever actually do. Most people who I've asked about it, who I know are good magicians and have been practitioners in the path, in past lives, often don't do that. But yes, you can take a familiar, and I like this trick. You can take a familiar and you can kind of assign them a task of meeting you in your next life when you're ready to start your spiritual path again. And they will use their own magic to produce certain spiritual experiences for you that will help guarantee that at an early point in your next life, you begin the spiritual path and you begin magic and you get drawn to those sorts of things. So yes, you can definitely set tasks for familiars and elemental beings who like you from lifetime to lifetime. Especially familiars, because familiars are often planetary beings or connected to the moon, and so they aren't bound by region, right? You wouldn't really want to do it with the local nature spirit, but you want to do it with beings who aren't bound by region. All right, Mike asks, does interacting with elemental spirits help us with our internal elements? And the answer basically is yes, okay, in the sense that they represent such a purity of that energy most of the time, right? The beings that we would work with as good white magicians, you could say, right? People on the upward ascending path of magic, the Dakshinachara instead of the Vamachara Tantra path. So being as we are involved in the great work, the beings that we interact with, yes, they will generally exert, even if only as subtle, they will generally exert a positive influence on your own elements. Because everything inside and out is the same. Everything's connected. There isn't this fierce division. Fierce division's in our minds. So just like how if you're around a certain person or type of person frequently, you'll pick up certain characteristics and either purify or dirty your character. The same thing applies to elemental beings. And you can purify or dirty your energies depending on what it is you're working with them for and what it is they're doing for you and the types of beings you're seeking out. But if you seek out these positive beings that are these pure elementals and guardians and watchers of regions and the likes, then yes, they can exert a positive evolutionary impact on our internal elements. Fox asks, what happens to a spirit of a place, say a lake or a plot of land, when humans take over that space, like people using a spring? If the geography remains, then the spirits will remain. But they won't be active there during sunlight hours if there's lots of humans. They'll kind of become nocturnal, and there won't be a lot of spirit activity. I've noticed that places where humans frequent, or places in parks that humans frequent, you don't get a lot of spirit activity until night. Whereas if it's a very isolated place, a remote place with very little human traffic or no human traffic, spirit activity can happen anytime. But otherwise, they tend to wait until night because we make ourselves scarce at that time. Luke asks, what kind of nature spirits could you contact on the ocean? Well, everything has its own version of all four elements. So you can find many different types, but I mean, the ocean has as many types of nature spirits as land does. It's a nearly infinite amount. And in fact, water spirits tend to be quite powerful. And some traditions regard water spirits and spirits of the oceans and of great lakes and large rivers to actually be in charge of all other types of nature spirits in that area, due to just how powerful how powerful an influence water exerts elementally on its landscape, as well as on the weather. Let's see, Hamish asks, would nature spirits have been around for as long as their vessel has been around? Say, would a river spirit have existed as long as that river? Do they procreate? So, elemental spirits are born, nature spirits are born as a result of a confluence of energies and the presence of mind. So generally, nature spirits are as old as the things that have been producing that energy. So if you find like a spirit of a river, it is generally as old as that river. Spirits of trees are generally as old as that tree, right? It's not always necessarily the case, but when I've asked about it or been curious, that's usually the answer, the types of answers I've been given. Tony asks, what kinds of nature spirits hang around in cities? Would it be common for them to take a dim view of humans in general, so we need to take a while to get their trust? Yes and no. Very similar to people, right? If you walk into a village in a distant country that doesn't have many visitors, then based on their past experiences with visitors, they will either treat you very coldly and distantly or very warmly because they have no reason to be suspicious of you. So same thing, nature spirits in very rural country type areas oftentimes don't mind people and may even sometimes like them. A lot of nature spirits like organization, and humans bring organization to things when we work with the land and the likes. So as long as there's not a lot of destruction, oftentimes nature spirits don't mind people. In big cities, my experience with that, just having examined them when I'm there, is of course there's always all the different types of elemental nature spirits are present in cities. But air elementals, wind elementals, are the most common because cities have very vast visible skylines and lots of wind and lots of sounds and lights radiating and lots of fast movement and motion. And wind spirits don't mind all those things. And in fact, of all the different types of elementals, air elementals probably are closest in mentality to humans. They think a little bit like humans. They can be a little kind of witty and cunning like humans. They have very quick minds like humans. They like motion like humans. So those are normally the types of spirits I've seen in big cities, are largely wind type spirits connected to the air element. Marcin asks, do nature spirits have a long lifespan? Some do, and some have very short lifespans. Some nature spirits last for days. Some, live for days. I would imagine some probably last for hours even. Some last for millennium. It really depends on what energy produced them, what energies they became connected to, and what things happened in their short lives that gave them a kind of force to keep living longer. And elemental nature spirits are on their own path of evolution, so they die and reincarnate within successive hierarchies and levels of being and reality within the sphere that we still consider elemental astral existence. So they'll die and reincarnate, and they may do that thousands of times, just like our souls, until they arrive at a body which is more permanent and lives longer, right? So they have their own kind of path that they go through life and death processes. And just like us, right? Our type of soul was learned how to be flies and worms and roaches and these other very, very short-lived things long before it ever acquired the energy for what we consider to be human existence. Right? Speaking in terms of thousands and thousands of lives here. Usually magically when we talk about the soul or lives, we just refer to the soul in the sense as the human soul, and lives in the sense of how many human lives you've had. But the energy that composes what eventually becomes a human soul, the human soul is the product of a very long chain of natural alchemy, we could say, that takes a very, very long time. Just like making a diamond beneath the earth takes a very, very long time. So that soul is literally a precious gem in the sense of natural processes over millions and millions of years have produced a soul capable of harboring intellect of the type that we find in human nature. So nature spirits have their own type of intellect, and they also have a soul of sorts that moves through progressive bodies over the course of hundreds of thousands or millions of years until they arrive at the level of being that most magicians work with. You're right, because it's hard to work with a nature spirit who has the awareness of a dog, for example, or a cat or a crab, you know? So normally when we work with nature spirits and we summon nature spirits and stuff, this is happening on a nearly human to human level where we're conjuring or we're working with the human equivalents of the nature spirit realm, what in the Middle East are called the jinn or the genie. So they have their whole own course of evolution also, and their own religions, and some of them even follow human religions. So it's very kind of an interesting world that the nature spirits live in. Jim asks, Ramos, there's a guy who is famous for claiming the Queen of England and various other famous politicians are reptilians. I was wondering whether these people could be incarnated fire spirits. I'm guessing that could explain the supposed lack of empathy they display. I mean, some people just acquire empathy as a result of their jobs, right? Like if you've been a police officer or something for 25 years, you may not have as much empathy because you've spent a lot of time around the worst people in society. And if you're a politician, I would almost argue you've also spent a lot of your time around the worst people in society. So these are, I wouldn't go as far as to say, I think sometimes our minds leap to find supernatural explanations for perfectly natural things. I don't think there's reptilians inhabiting the world leaders or anything like that. I think everyone's just going through their own thing. Squares don't fit inside of triangles, of equal space, so to say. There's a type of soul that incarnates in a type of body. Human souls incarnate in human bodies. Juliano's asking, if someone has to cut off a tree for some reason, cut down a tree, what can be a good offer to ask for forgiveness? So yeah, if you have to do something like that, traditionally what you would do first is you would go out and make an offering to the tree, leave just a little stick of incense or something. Don't light anything on fire, right? Be mindful. Make some water oblations and announce your intention. Announce that for this or that reason, this tree has to come down, and any spirits connected to it, you would like to withdraw from that tree so that nobody gets hurt or anything of that sorts. And then after you cut the tree down, make a simple offering near where it was, like put a small crystal in the ground or something and offer your apologies. It doesn't need to be taken to any sorts of extremes. You don't need to sit there and cry about it. Nature spirits live side by side basically with humans. They understand the things we do, whether we need to or not. Pablo says, which spirits in particular are important to befriend and have good relationships in and around your home? Gnomes and air elementals, what offerings should be made and how often? So yeah, we're going to get to kind of some specific offerings and stuff shortly. In terms of what kinds of nature spirits you want to befriend, the answer is all of them, right? Because you don't want to be friends with everybody but the fire spirit and then your house burns down. So you want to make, generally speaking, equal offerings, equal type offerings to the different elements, the different directions, the different kinds of beings. So Generally speaking, don't think, well, it's more important for me to be these guys' friends than those people. That's usually not the case. Treat everybody equally. If any of them reach out to you, then obviously you can develop a more special relationship with them. But I would say it's equally important to have a relationship with all of them. Nikolai's asking, in a lucid dream, would I just say, my familiar, come and speak to me now, please? Or do I need to travel to him like I would to you or someone else? If you can get into a lucid dream, generally speaking, kind of going into a meditative state and calling out for a familiar may get them to come to you if you have one. Otherwise, you may have made some agreement with the spirit that you need to have its name and sigil in order for it to come, at which point that information would probably be spontaneously revealed to you in a dream at the right time. Thiago is asking, Ramos, common nature spirits can teach magical secrets like tricks with the elements and vital force. And yes, that's true. Even your typical nature spirits work by a kind of magic, or rather I should say what they consider to just be work, we understand as a type of magic. So by speaking with them, we can gain insight into some nifty little tricks and stuff like that. They always have some interesting little ways to do things. What do you think about using the linking sigil, at least for bringing the spiritual into the mundane? That's fine. Any sigil you want to use for that is perfectly fine. And Nikolai asks, does inhaling lots of vital force increase the psychic channels and improve the connection? Do we hold the vital force or should we exhale it all before trying to connect? You don't want to talk to an elemental spirit supercharged with vital force. A lot of times they won't come. The vital force is fundamentally electric, and nature spirits are comparatively magnetic. So it's an adverse energy, right? Because other than fire spirits. But even then, you risk influencing the energy of their existence a little bit too much. So you should be in a fairly open, peaceful, receptive mood and energetic situation when you go to speak with nature spirits. Tony asks, do nature spirits think we're pretty cool if we're outside doing vital force accumulation? Does doing magic beforehand increase the likelihood of them wanting to be our friends? Yes, being involved in the magical world, having internal energy, having some things that make you a little more visible in their realm, makes you stand out to them and makes it easier for them to communicate with you. Just like we can have a hard time seeing them, they can have a hard time seeing us, right? Because we're just functioning at different wavelengths. They're not tuned into our radio station, we're not tuned into theirs. So just in that exact same sense, doing some magic, doing anything evolutionary that helps elevate the spiritual vibration so that we can connect to that level more easily is always going to make them more curious about us and actually make it easier for them to reach out and communicate to us. So yes, in that sense, doing magic increases the likelihood of them not just wanting to, but being able to connect to you. Paul's asking, Paul is asking, I've been able to create a relationship with the local tree spirit by continually cleaning up a park I've been frequenting to until I was led to it. It has given me a couple of energy transmissions. Yeah, absolutely. Things like that can definitely happen. And sometimes different energy. So what he's referring to as like a tree spirit is oftentimes there's a particularly intelligent local lord, you could say, in the hierarchy of regional nature spirits, is often powerfully associated to the oldest tree in that area. So in the oldest tree in that area, what you do is when you find that tree, you look around and you see if all the trees near it are kind of leaning in towards it, almost like they're bowing. And if so, if you look around and you can tell that that's the case, then that's the regional lord, so to say, of the nature spirits in that area is connected to that tree. Pablo's asking, is it good to adorn your gardens or yards with things like statues or gnomes or other nature spirits? Should offerings be made to these statues? That's completely up to you. As an aspiring and practicing magician, it's completely your call to set up small altars, and if those include little gnomes or whatever else, or fairies or anything like that, anything that in your mind helps connect to them, then yeah, you can go out and make offerings, and that will help build a connection. Quilliam is asking, are the evolution of nature spirits separate from humans, meaning spirits don't eventually become humans? Right, nature spirits do not eventually become humans in the sense that we generally understand. They can, if they acquire a certain degree of elemental balance and equilibrium, but they never really have to. It's not per se an important part of their growth in this circuit of creation. In some future circuit, they'll have to move from being, I guess what you could call single dimensional beings in the sense that they favor one or two elements. They will eventually have to move to being tetrapolar beings. But that happens over an extraordinarily long period of time. So, like universal cycles level of time. So it's not really something that you need to think about when you think of them. I mean, they'll eventually become human in the same way that we'll eventually become angels and archangels. Nikolai's asking, in an underground meditation chamber, because of magnetic energy, would it be easier to connect to nature spirits, familiars, and others? Evocation and summoning spirits is always easier in highly magnetic situations, like in a cave or underground. Keith is asking, would tree practice be particularly beneficial to a spirit of the tree and a way to open a connection? Yes. Yeah, doing an energetic exchange or practice with the tree could help open a connection to the spirit associated with it. All right, good. So what we're going to do now is take a short break, just 5 minutes or so. And in 5 minutes, we'll start back up and I'll go over some different methods for things. And then we'll end with another Q&A. So see you in 5. All right, I'm back. So now that we've talked a little bit about nature spirits and what's basically going on with them and where they are and the likes, but just remember, nature spirits are everywhere. They're connected to everything. Because everything is mind, everything is personified, right? And this is an important concept to grasp as a magician. It's the other side of the Veda Vedantic coin. Because everything is consciousness, and consciousness's own illumination is mind, everything is mind. And because everything is mind, everything can be personality, which is a personality is a trait comprehended by mind. So because everything can be personality, everything can be personified and be truly and actually personified, be real and personified. So in that sense, nearly anything could be seen as having a spirit associated with it. And ancient magicians would use this concept quite liberally. They would literally have a spirit for nearly everything, because everything can be personified as a means of your mind interacting with the mind stratum or substance of whatever the other thing is. Even a rock, even a stone, has a certain matrix of energy holding it together, and that matrix of energy can be personified. And that personification can be a means for our personalities to interact together, because personality is just layers of data coming from mind. So the two minds can interact, the mind holding the stone together and the mind holding you together can exchange information through the means of equally illusory personalities. Because your personality is really truly no more real than the personality that you would call forth from a single stone. So everything can be personified. Some of these personifications are so vast because the networks of data they contain are so vast that they really do independently exist. They comprehend whatever it is they're connected to rather than that thing comprehending them. That means they're superior to it and they exist independently from it and without it. Just like how you exist independently from and without a body, but move through a body. Nature spirits of a higher order exist independently from but move through physical bodies as well, whether those bodies be rivers or mountains or whatever the case is. Generally speaking, the most powerful nature spirits in the world are the types of nature spirits that are connected to volcanoes, the caldera of a volcano, that are connected to very large lakes, very wide and powerful rivers, and very tall mountains. Generally speaking, these are the most powerful nature spirits in the world. And of course, the higher echelon of spirits connected to the ocean are very powerful. Those beings, some of those beings are actually so powerful they technically transcend elemental association, even though they work through something that seems to be elemental. They themselves have become quite beyond that, a very kingly status. But these beings, these special beings, we can do prayers to the more powerful beings if we want. We can direct every now and then, but unless you have a volcano nearby or something, there's not really a great reason for that. Most important is just kind of honoring the presence of local nature spirits, because these are the people, these are the beings that control the local weather. These are the beings that control things like mudslides and natural accidents, accidental fires, forest fires, those sorts of things that can harm us and obstruct us. And in so doing can obstruct our path also, our spiritual path. Those are the types of beings that are good to honor, because then they can also protect you from animals and the likes. They can keep you safe. If you ever get lost, they'll intuitively or magically point you the right direction. So these sorts of beings are important to work with. A very simple way to interact with local beings is to get an offering cup like this. This one is silver. Yours doesn't have to be silver, but make it one of the 7 metals. Make it one of the 7 metals. So silver is good. Gold is too electric. Silver is good. Copper is good. Iron is also good. So those are really the three best in terms of an offering bowl. Brass is fine too. Most metals are fine. Just gold is too electric. Okay. And you probably can't afford a solid gold offering dish anyways. So get your silver cup, get an offering spoon, right? Made of copper. This one's made out of brass. Copper, brass, whichever one's fine. Something small like this, small size, right? A very small size spoon. Because you don't need a lot to make the offerings. And what you want to do is with nature spirits, you want to use, generally speaking, you want to use vodka. The vodka is a very natural grain. It's a very natural grain alcohol. And it can be made with minimal human processing, right? So vodka is generally what we want to use. It doesn't need to be any particular strength or purity. Just, in my opinion, too high purity is unnatural. It's too man-made. So get one of the lower levels, percentage-wise, and one of the lower proofs, and work with that. Cheap vodka is fine. Nature spirits don't care. But vodka is the traditional offering. If you don't want to offer vodka for personal reasons, or you're not old enough, or it's too expensive where you live, or you don't want people to think you've picked up a drinking habit because word spreads or whatever the case, people have their reasons. Tea is the next best. Tea is the next best, especially black tea. So do vodka or black tea. Milk can also be done. Milk is usually reserved for some specific things, but milk can also be done. But usually we use milk for restitution, like forgiveness, as an offering. So what we're going to do, just to keep them pleased, is put some vodka, fill up your little bowl, and you get your cup. And the way you do offerings here, when you're offering to the nature spirits, and when you're offering to most beings, honestly, this is all done outside. Right? You can do it inside if you don't mind vodka getting over your stuff. But what you'll do is you hold your hand in front of the offering bowl like this, and always hold the offering bowl at or above heart level. Somewhere between heart and throat is ideal, right? But not lower than the heart. So hold it above the heart level, or at heart level. And you scoop towards you and up. And the reason you do this is that when you offer, you can offer like this. And this flings your offer. With nature spirits, you want to fling. You want the vodka to go as far as possible, right? And far from you, because you're very electric. So nature spirits usually don't like to come too close to humans. So you dip in and you fling the vodka offering kind of as far as you can. A little flick of the wrist, right? Practice makes perfect. So again, that motion seen from the side comes in here and out. So not like this, not scooping towards you, right? If you scoop towards you and then pour out, first you offered it to yourself, right? So traditionally, shamanic way is to come in here so that it's clear that you're never involved. It's never, you can even tilt this forward a little bit to kind of push the energies this way, away from you. Okay? The idea is that you're not involved in this offering. You're just the offering. That way you don't take any of the energy. Which is another important thing about when you're worshiping and when you're performing oblations and the likes with anything. And this applies whether you're doing worship to gods, offerings to masters, or just propitiation of local spirits. Whatever it is you're using for the offering needs to be solely for offerings. You can't even smell it. Right? If you happen to get a whiff, like vodka strong, if you happen to get a whiff of it, that's fine. But you can't, or anything like that. And you can't drink from the bottle at any point unless you're never going to use it for nature spirits again. If it's ever going to be used for offerings again, it can never be used by a human again. So you can't use some half-filled bottle of vodka left over from a night with your friends and go out there and make spirit offerings with it, because you all have already put all your junk in there. You've already filled it with all your stuff. Nature spirits don't want that. Too human. So you use unopened bottle of vodka, and then you set it aside and you only use it for making offerings. And that way it'll take you forever to work through a bottle of vodka in this way. So again, you hear this tilts a little bit forward, and you come in here and flick so that the offering goes up and out. And we start this with nature spirits, we start in the west. So we start by facing the west, and this can be done morning or evening. A lot of people, shamans and all different traditions, they do it both morning and evening. I like to do it evening. Some people just do it morning. So either one's fine, whatever works out with your schedule. But you go out, you face the west. And in the west, you offer to the mountains 1 foot, and to the spirits of the mountains 2nd foot. Then you move from the west to the north, and you offer to the waters and to the spirits of the waters. And then you move from north to east, and you offer to the forests and to the spirits of the forests. And then you move from east to south, and you offer to the animals and to the spirits of the animals. Right? And then you move to the center of your offering circle, or the space of your yard, wherever it is that you're doing this. You've walked in the circle, you've made offerings in the 4 directions. You come back to the center, and you offer to the sky and throw up, straight up, so that the vodka will even a little bit lands on you. That's fine. You offer to the sky, to the spirits of the sky, and you offer to Mother Earth, to the spirits of Mother Earth. This is the only one that's done like this. Okay, this one you scoop, not towards, but here, and then pour out this way. Okay, sideways scoop, pour out this way. So to Earth, to the spirits of the Earth. If you want to be like, this is a Mongolian style offering, so if you want to be Mongolian, you'd say to Father Sky and Mother Earth, right? So Tengri and Tenma in Mongolian words, but you just say to the sky, to the spirits of the sky, to the earth, to the spirits of the earth. So this covers all your elementals, all your nature spirits in this type of offering. And when you're offering to the earth, you're not just offering to earth elementals. Same thing as when you're offering to the sky, you're not just offering to sky elementals or to air elementals. There are elementals of all types in every place. So there's lava down there too, deep in the earth. We're offering to those guys also. There's vast caverns. We're offering to them. There's underground rivers. We're offering to them when we say to the earth and to the spirits of the earth. Right. So again, west to the mountains and to the spirits of the mountains. North to the waters, to the spirits of the waters. East to the rivers, to the spirits of the rivers. South to the animals, the spirits of the animals. Then come back to the center, and you can face any direction when you're back in the center. It doesn't matter. So back in the center, facing any direction, then to the sky, and the spirits of the sky, to the earth, and the spirits of the earth. So this is a very simple but very effective offering method that helps connect us to the nature spirits. It makes them a part of our day. It makes them a part of our day, and it shows that we care. It shows that we care about forming this connection with them. We recognize them. We're not just going to ignore them. It makes us conscientious of it also throughout the day. So we will find ourselves less likely to do things which offend them. We will be more conscientious of it. So you make those 2 offerings in each direction. And the reason you do the 2 offerings is because there are classes of nature spirits that are too unevolved for individual personality. And they only identify themselves as extensions of the place they dwell. So you offer to that region, right, to that kind of habitat, so to say. So, and with forest, if you live in the desert, replace forest with the term desert, right? Or forest you can replace with kind of the unique ecosystem of your area. And so that one you would do in the east. But so you make those because you have these different layers of nature spirits, and at one point they're not advanced enough to identify themselves as anything other than their geography. They're barely aware of their own existence. And then the next level is that more animal and human range of nature spirits. And then there's the next level, which is almost a godly type range of nature spirits, who also they've transcended their personalities and their individuality. And so they also don't really associate themselves as being separate from the thing that they work through. Like a very powerful mountain spirit won't see itself as different from the mountain because it's transcended that kind of individuality in regards to its place, to the mountain. Now, so that's why you do those two offerings, because the offering, like you say, offered to the mountain, that covers both the ones who aren't advanced enough yet to see themselves as separate and the ones who've gone beyond their separation. So you get the highest and the lowest by offering to the mountain. And then you get everyone in between by offering to the spirits of the mountain. And so on with each of the directions and elements. So that's first thing to consider. Second thing to consider is, like I said, the forest in the east can be replaced by whatever your local habitat is. Like I'm in the desert right now, so I would offer it to the spirits of the desert, not spirits of the forest, because the nearest forest is, 40 miles away. So in terms of local spirits, I would offer to the desert. And then the third consideration is if you are in a place where each of these things has a clear directional association, you can change the directions to represent that association, right? So if you have a really big towering mountain to the east, then make the offering to the mountain in the east. And if you have a rushing river in the south, like you look out from the south and there's a big river, or you're just very aware that nearby there's a big river that direction, then make your water offerings in the south. If a big forest is to the west, so on and so forth. If your geography has a specific arrangement and kind of has all four of these, then set it up accordingly. And because that helps reinforce. I mean, you're making it to the nature spirits, not to the planets or anything. So this is a very earthbound terrestrial thing. You don't need to get caught up on the more sublime, higher hermetic associations. We're working right here in the region with these beings. So there's no point if the mountain is in the east, there's no point offering to the mountain in the west, just because that's kind of the traditional association for it. Right? Just offer to the mountain in the east. That's where the mountain spirits are. So be cognizant of that also. So those are the three things to understand about this offering. So any questions about that before we move on? If you have any questions about that offering method, please ask now. Tony has already asked, are the directions the same in the Southern Hemisphere? Yes, same in the Southern Hemisphere. And again, you can customize it to base it on your local geography. Fox says, I live in Florida. Should I still offer to the mountains? Yes, I would still offer to the mountains even if you're in Florida. Mountains form an important part of the geography, no matter what the geography now looks like. So I would still include offering to the mountains. And if it's hills, yeah, you can say to the hills or to the rolling plains. You can customize this a little bit. It's fine. Which Orphic hymn could we tie into that offering method? Whichever Orphic hymns you want to. And Luke is asking, we live on an island, so would that change the offering order any? Nope. If you live on an island, then just use the order I showed you. Mike says, I was just thinking about that. I have a visible mountain in the west, Lake Mead in the north, desert in the east. And, local animal habitation. If you've narrowed down where everything else is, then put the animals in the spot that's not being occupied. Should we make offerings every day? It really depends on the level to which you want to interact with this, to the level to which you'd like to take this. You definitely can make these offerings every day. It only takes a few minutes. It's not a huge detraction from the day. And I find that if you do it in the mornings especially, it helps bring a magical sense of life to your day. Miailo says, what if mountains and rivers are in the same direction? Then pick whichever one you think is most prominent for that direction. Like if it's small mountains but a big, big important river, maybe put the river in that direction. If it's a really giant mountains but a small river, put the mountains in that direction. Afinoy asks, what legomena would be appropriate for offerings? So mantra for offerings, whatever mantras you like, but you can also just say what I said. That alone is fine. Otherwise, you can use, if in the theurgic scheme, you can use the ancient Greek, kalon akausa geras kai timion. So that's kalon akausa geras kai timion. It means honorable, or you are honorable, and so is your portion. So is what is due to you. But otherwise, you can just say, like, to the mountains, the spirits of the mountains. Just say it in English. That's fine too. Hamish says, would it be good to incorporate some local offerings into the vaka, like a certain herb which was traditionally offered, turned into a vaka tincture? That's fine. Absolutely, you can do something like that. Well, you guys pulled a lot of questions out of this. Inquisitive. William asks, I'm surrounded by mountains, but I have a big Apache holy mountain to the southwest of me, which is really prominent. Should I stick to the cardinal directions? What I would do in that sense is if you have something like an Apache, if you have some kind of real big holy mountain nearby and it's in a cardinal direction, just go ahead and keep it in the cardinal direction and add an extra offering to that particular mountain. And Nikolai asks, so it's okay to do this ritual in the middle of city center in one's apartment? Yeah, perfectly fine. You're just going to get some vodka on your stuff. But in a park or in a natural place is always better, but I understand not everybody has that situation. Guilherme says, when you mentioned the directions, I was imagining that we spin in place. You can do whichever one you want. You can spin in place. I like to walk around in a circle. I like to take up a broad space when I do this. But you can just spin in one spot. That's fine. Jim asks, can we appease insects and the damage they can potentially cause? And if so, is there a particular method? Yes, I mean, with working with infectious bugs and stuff like that, there's a whole system of talismans and the likes that can be used. That's something ancient magicians, ironically, were called on for a lot, is bug infestations in houses and a time before bug poisoning. So ironically, ancient tombs are full of methods for dealing with those critters. But generally speaking, make your offerings, talk to the spirits, see if they can help. If not, take care of it the human way. Things will work themselves out. There are also many different brands of things now. Some things aren't so much poisons anymore as they are like discouragements for those types of things. And I would also research holistic or non-harmful methods to discourage those bugs from being there. Sometimes there's essential oils like neem oil is very, very good at that you can spray on places where these bugs are prominent, and it doesn't kill or hurt the bugs, but it makes them get out of there and go somewhere else. So that's worth researching if you want to be mindful of the spirits. Ethan asks, what is an appropriate offering when visiting a unique place, such as the summit of a mountain? I'll cover that in a moment. And Timothy asks, can a ritual bowl be used that's used for other rituals? Yeah, that's fine. It can be used for other rituals. It doesn't need to be exclusive to the elemental requests. Jesse asks, Paul and I, oh, never mind, he wasn't asking, he was just sharing. Jesse asks, do spirits particularly enjoy areas like with mountains on all sides and lots of powerful energy there? Yeah, they do. Sometimes you can find places, especially places where there's lots of magnetic energy, which comes from that cooling energy, that mountains, shaded forests, undisturbed ground, caves, flowing rivers, springs. All those bring a magnetic energy to the place that spirits are drawn to naturally. Thiago asks, this is a good question. Thiago says, if the ocean is present in geography, should an offering be performed to it also? You can perform an offering to the ocean specifically, or you can just use the direction of the ocean for your offering to the water. And just when you make the offering, mentally kind of also include ocean spirits. Ethan asks, would the forest offering be different if you live in the middle of one? Nope. You can still just pick a direction that works and put it there. Like I said, these things aren't hooked up. This kind of an offering isn't hooked up to the planets or anything. So specific directions aren't especially important here. Pablo asks, is there much danger of harm in opening oneself up in this way? Like if you're especially sensitive to spirits? Again, it depends on the type of mind. If you're the type of person to stress and worry about it and always be afraid, and you feel like you're always on the verge of possession or something, or demons are invading your house, those sorts of things, then I would maybe recommend staying away from this sort of thing. Because like I said earlier, it can overactivate the imagination. Things can get out of control. So if they don't kind of have that courage there, I would recommend this sort of activity. Juliano says, if I don't have appropriate spoon and bowl, can I use a glass one and a normal spoon? That's fine. Use whatever you have. I just shared the ideal with you. If you can use a noble metal and if you can just use noble metals for it, that's ideal. If not, then that's fine. Mike says, can we offer vodka to the spirits of the plants we grow for alchemy? Is there something particular about traditional alchemy herbs like lemon balm or rosemary? Yeah, absolutely. You can make offerings to the spirits of certain plants. That's fine. You can put it maybe on the very outside of the container of the plants. You can offer incense to the plants to connect to their spirit. That's perfectly fine. Nikolai says, cemeteries attract nature spirits too due to magnetic energy being there. Yes, cemeteries attract nature spirits. Cemeteries are traditional places to do a lot of spirit work. In America, it's difficult, and I don't know so much how it is in other countries. A lot of old world countries, you can just walk right into a cemetery, nobody really bothers you. In places with a spiritual culture, they almost expect somebody to be there doing something kind of odd in the cemetery. But in the West, cemeteries are kind of sacred in that regard. You're not really, people don't like you walking around in them. You have to look for a real rural, out of the way cemetery. Pablo says, are there spirits that live and watch over houses? Yes, there are kind of domestic nature spirits that have developed. I'm not sure they were always domestic. But yeah, they're nature spirits that particularly like houses. They're called house gnomes or brownies or hobgoblins. And they can be good or bad. Usually they just collect little things you lose. They form like little rat's nests almost somewhere in your house. It's not always easy to tell if you have one or you just have a rat or something. But generally speaking, as long as the house has a pleasant energy, those spirits are pleasant. And if the house has an unpleasant energy, those spirits can become a little violent. Marcin asks, is it fine to do the offerings in the middle of the night? Perfectly fine. Nikolai asks, what about cremation grounds? No, cremation grounds work too. They are also quite electric. Cremation grounds are better for working with human spirits, but nature spirits are still there. They can still be called there. So, good. All right, you all pulled a lot of questions out of a pretty short ritual. So that's one thing you can do for just basically connecting. Now, kind of in connection to someone else's question, what do you do for like specific places? Then that's when you make like a treasure offering. A treasure offering is shiny things, precious metals, crystals, gems. They can all be cheap. You can get cheap versions of each different thing. And you take it and you can put them in a pouch, some kind of nice looking pouch like this. A pouch like this is only $1 or something. Or you could even put them in a glass vase or something. You take that out to the place or to the mountain or to the specific river or cave, whatever it is you're trying to honor, and you bury it there, very gently bury it there. Don't dig, 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 dig. You don't want to disturb the land. Nothing that you can't move away with your hands, right? Even better is like if it's a river, reach down there and move some of the river rocks up and put it down and then cover it with the river rocks. If the river takes it and puts it wherever it wants, let it take it and put it wherever it wants. And when you do that, just put that in the ground and light some incense. Incense is always good. Incense is a good, smoke in general is a good medium of communication between us and nature spirits. So it's easier kind of to connect to them and draw them to us if we light some incense or some sage or smudge stick, whatever it is you're using. That helps bring the communication about a little more easily. So you light some incense, let the smoke kind of go up and spread, and say that you're making this offering and that you would like protection and that you acknowledge and respect and revere the local spirit or the Lord. Treasure offerings you really make to the Lord of the area, not so much the individual smaller guys. This is like if you're on a big mountain like Mount Shasta, something with a very prominent spiritual energy to it, then you make an offering like this. And you can do that even if the mountain has many different little streams or something coming off of it. Find one of the streams and make the offering in that. That's even better. If there's no streams, then just do it anywhere on the ground or beneath a very large rock is a great spot. Again, you want to leave the landscape as you found it when you make a treasure offering. So don't go out there and dig, 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 dig and drop some giant chest in the ground. That's too human. Move a big rock, scoop out a little spot, put it there, move the big rock back, right? Or put it beneath some river stones, whatever the case is. That sort of thing is a good way to make an offering to a local lord. Or if you find a very large tree like what I talked about earlier, that's often the indicator for the spirit lord of a certain forest. Go to the roots of the tree where they spread out and tuck it in there somewhere. Or if it has a knot or something, tuck it in there. Especially, in that case, maybe just the crystals or something themselves, not the man-made stuff. And that's how you make a simple offering to a local lord. And then you can sit and light some incense and make a little prayer. And again, the biggest thing is just acknowledging, say, I acknowledge you, I respect you. Please be peaceful towards me. Please let us be friendly towards each other. And protect me and protect those close to me. So a simple offering like that. And usually there'll be some kind of energetic response. A certain smell will come out of nowhere. Wind will blow. You may hear a sound in the distance. Birds. Lots of nature spirits communicate through birds. So lots of birds may come and land, or lots of birds may fly a certain direction. There's usually some kind of response. The local lord has a lot more power than all the other spirits, so it's much easier for that being to make its presence known, to make its pleasure or displeasure known. So that's a very simple type of offering that you can make. Or if you want to make one to the ocean, you can do it on the beach. But just like dig up the sand a little bit, put it in there, cover it. Especially if you can put it somewhere where the tide will wash it away. That's good. Let the ocean take it. That sort of thing is a good offering. So these are all for offerings. For appeasements, we use milk. For appeasements, we use milk. And you can do the same thing. You can use a little bowl like this. Or you can just go out there with the milk directly. And you would make a small little bowl in the earth. Just with your hands, scoop out a spot in the earth. Or you can pour it into a river. That's fine, a body of water or a creek or stream. If you're doing it on land, scoop out small little bowls worth on the ground. And very slowly pour the milk. And visualize that the milk magnifies hundreds of times, amplifies. Right? Like rivers of milk pour forth from this little crater on the ground that you've made. Rivers of milk pour forth, climb up mountains, everything. Go every direction. And you visualize that nature spirits of all types, shapes, and colors, as well as wild animals, birds, everything, are coming up to this milk, drinking from it, playing in it, getting drunk from it, and are just overtaken by joy and peace. And anything that they're upset about, anything that bothers them, that issue is quenched and dealt with, and they become happy. Right? And if you can use the name of your preferred deity, you can chant it gently or something while you're visualizing this, and imagine that they all hear it, become happy and peaceful. And then once you've poured this out, I would say about halfway through your milk offering, put the milk down and do a small confession. And the confession should be something along the lines of, I acknowledge that we have torn up your home, we've dammed your waters, we've polluted your rivers and your water sources, we've torn down your forests, we've mined out the core and the heart of your mountains, we've blown up your mountains, we've trashed your lands, we've set fire to your forests, we've beaten your animals and chased them off, we've hunted and killed your creatures. This type of a confession is very important for nature spirits. Just like humans, what's one of the biggest things a human wants before they give forgiveness? Most humans will forgive somebody once we see that the other person really cares. Once we see that the other person registers they did something wrong. And usually if we don't forgive somebody for something, it's because we don't feel like they get it. We don't feel like they understand what they did. So this is the level of nature spirit we're talking to is of a human type intellect. And we're trying to communicate this idea that we care, right? We're trying to communicate the idea that we are aware those things have happened, and that we just, me and you, little individual people, may even be powerless to stop it. But we're aware it's happening and we're sorry for it. And we're just sorry that it's happening to these beings and that their homes are being uprooted by it. And so as you're making this, kind of visualize that hurt or damaged or wounded or bleeding elemental beings are also coming up to the milk and washing themselves with it, and it's healing them, right? And it's healing and curing their wounds. And say something along the lines of, like, may this milk be a healing balsam for you. May you rejoice in it. May there be peace between me and you. May your wounds be healed. May your desires be satisfied. May your lands be protected. And may there be peace between me and you. And then make the rest of your offering. And with that same visualization, that the milk just goes out infinitely, many different directions, and all different types of living beings are made happy by it. And so this is a simple milk offering that we use to appease local beings. And then what you can do is light some incense. Also, light some incense. You can kind of put it like an incense stick, put it in the middle of the milk basin, and let the incense stick burn away and kind of put itself out in the milk. And that's also kind of a good way to conclude it. And then if you want, you can add some treasure offerings, right? Like if after you make your milk offering, maybe leave a couple of little cheap crystals or something like that. Just anything that communicates that idea that, I'm sorry, I confess, I'm aware that this is happening. I don't do this, and I'm sorry if I ever have, which is another thing. Confess that I'm sure I've done some of these things in the past. I'm sorry, right? Like, repent for anything you've ever done, leaving trash or something like that, or killing or hunting an animal or whatever the case is. Also apologize for those things. So this is a very simple way to make a milk offering to these beings and develop some appeasement. If you can make the milk offering into a river or a creek, that's the best. But if you can't, just do it in a pit in the ground. And again, not a pit you dug, just something you scooped out with your hand a little bit. And that'll be good. So those are all very, very simple ways that we can work with these beings and appease them and work with them some. So if you have any questions on those two methods of working with them, making the treasure offerings and making the milk offering, go ahead and ask those, and that's how we will wrap up the night, is with those questions. So one question is, what are the prerequisites a magician should have in order for, say, powerful fire spirits to entrust us with preparations of various elixirs, alchemical preparations, and eventually the philosopher's stones? That's not an easy question. The higher beings who have that sort of knowledge genuinely want to see a very deep sincerity in you. And there needs to have been some confession. You need to have a good relationship with these beings. They need to believe in you. They need to believe that you're not going to turn this around on them in some way. Or you're not going to abuse their power for wealth or fame or whatever the case is. Then perhaps they may entrust you with it. Pablo asks, can befriending nature spirits help if a cursed object has been hidden in a house? Yes, befriending nature spirits can help with any bad situation, can turn bad luck into good luck. They can, even local nature spirits can help break curses and may even help defend your house if they see something negative coming up to it. Oh yeah, so Juliano asked, this is an important thing to kind of consider real quick. Can we cover about banishing them if it will be needed? So sometimes you open up your door, you invite lots of good people, one bad person slides in. Or sometimes you invite lots of good people and they just throw a party and they won't leave, right? So this can happen sometimes where elementals can kind of take over the home and create some disturbances for you. In that instance, usually, typically, all that's needed in a situation like that is to announce your displeasure. To just say that, you know, you're no longer welcome in my home. You've made a mess of things. You're scaring me. You're bothering me. Whatever the case is, have a decent reason for it. Don't just be like, oh, I heard a bump, and I lack courage, so now I'm shouting at the spirits I invited into my house. Right? That's not a nice thing to do. We wouldn't like it if we did that to a person or a person did that to us. So don't do it to a nature spirit. Right? But humbly request and be honest. Like if you are just getting freaked out, say, hey, I'm sorry. Some of this is freaking me out. Would you please leave? Would you please consider leaving? And then what you can do is you can light some sage, though sulfur is actually better for this, but you need to find the right kind of sulfur incense and stick that you can light appropriately and safely. But you can light sage and go through your house and do like a smudging. And imagine that sage smoke actually spreads out and kind of pushes the spirits away. That because sage smoke's very, very thick. Nature spirits don't like thick smoke. So sage smoke's very thick. It burns very thick black smoke. So imagine that thick black smoke goes out and chases away and pushes out all the other spirits inside the house. And then go to each of your doorways and just put your hand on the doorway or the window and just assert that nature spirits aren't welcome in here right now. Right? Anything of that sort. Or say like anything unfriendly or only friendly beings. Authority is a very subtle thing on the physical realm, but it's a very real thing on the astral realm. So literally just exerting that authoritative statement that you're not allowed here anymore creates a very real magnetic wall on a more subtle astral level. And usually just that's fine. And if you need something more exhaustive, you can contact me personally and we can talk about what your situation is. But typically that alone is sufficient. Another question, why do elementals incarnate into human bodies? What happens after their physical death? Is there karma as to their incarnations into human bodies, and do they return to their realm? So I think incarnation of an elemental into a human body can happen, but that it is extremely rare, and that Westerners with very good hearts and vivid imaginations often trick themselves into thinking that they are an elemental or something. But it's very, very rare. And an elemental, a person who is an elemental would seem nearly possessed. They would seem insane to a normal person. So, but it does happen. Sometimes it happens because that elemental being worked closely with humans in a certain life. Maybe the elemental being is just trying out certain things. Maybe the elemental being realized that with the right amount of magic and willpower, it could take a human body. It may have practiced this with animals first, and then just thought to itself, well, humans are animals. Why can't I do this with a human? Right? It wasn't necessarily malintent. It's just flexing its muscles a little bit. So that can happen. And then, yeah, it has its own karma and everything. And depending on the kind of human life it lives, it may actually develop enough of a relationship with the other elements that when he dies or she dies, that being reincarnates as a real human now and is now part of the human evolutionary cycle. That sort of thing can happen. It can happen to humans too. Humans can jump into the nature spirit cycle. But again, it's very difficult and extremely rare. It requires extreme elemental imbalance for many, many lifetimes, not just one lifetime. Nikolai asks, milk is okay if it's 2%? So as close as you can get to real, full, whole milk is what you want to use for this. How much milk should be used? A bottle, a bowl, whatever, however much you want to use. I think a gallon would be a bit much, but at the same time, I've participated in offerings to the spirits where the shaman used a whole gallon of milk. So it really just depends on what you're doing, how long the ritual is, what all's going on there. Like, for example, if there's been very bad drought gripping your region for years, you may want to bust out the whole gallon. The whole gallon might be helpful. And could I please pronounce Enoresi Bakyon? Enoresi Bakyon. I want to start using this version, but I don't know how to pronounce it. Yeah. Enoresi Bakyon. Pablo asks, I believe I have semi-accidentally thrown a lizard spirit into a fire a couple of years before joining the school. I can imagine that offering milk to reconcile for this might be pretty important. Yeah, if you think there's a spirit out there with a chip on its shoulder towards you, I would make some offerings. Jim says, can we make a treasure offering for our house land for general protection and luck, or is there another method for appropriate for house protection? Absolutely, you can make treasure offerings for houses. And in many more shamanic cultures, Mongolia, South America, even Native America, they will actually make a treasure offering below the foundation of the house before the house is built, as a remedy for any bad luck or bad feng shui, you could say, that would affect it. Mike says, Las Vegas is in a bowl of mountains. Is there a valley lord, or is valley subject to the mountain? Valley is always subject to the mountain. The mountain rules it. Nikolai says, my brother and I were planning on starting going through forest with metal detectors as a nature hobby, but this is not good, right? If we find something, are we stealing it from the nature spirits? Kind of. Yeah, I mean, not everything is protected by nature spirits. And most stuff isn't. But if you find something particularly valuable, I would leave it. And if you take something and your luck turns south, I would take it back and put it where you found it. There are people whose lives have fallen apart just because they took a pebble or a rock from a sacred island or a sacred mountain, and their whole lives fell apart, and it took them a decade or more to realize what the source was, and then they went and put the rock back and everything got better immediately. So some spirits can be very, very protective. John asks, can a relationship be established with spirits living in a domestic garden without the development of magical senses? Of course, you can always develop a relationship with these things without the magical senses. The magical, like you can do any of these offerings we've talked about already. The magical senses will come later, and making these offerings and connections to the spirits will in time actually help you develop these magical senses. That's perfectly fine. So yes, work with them anyways, even in your garden. Very, very good to invite local spirits into your garden. Very, very good way to help maintain them. Ethan asks, is it important for treasure offerings to come from somewhere far away? For example, I found a lot of quartz crystals where I live. Some is native, some palm and gravel driveway. It doesn't need to come from far away. It can be found locally or something, that's fine. Though I would recommend putting some things you think maybe they haven't seen before. Do the prayers have to be said aloud, or can they be said in our thoughts? They can be said in your thoughts. Or whispered is better, probably, than completely quiet. Mike asks, is rosemary good for banishment of nature spirits? Yeah, rosemary, anything with a very strong aroma and smoke like that can be used for banishing spirits. Spirits of any type, nature spirits or not. Diego asks, can I talk about the relationship about nature spirits and the ketonomai? Right, so there are certain types of prayers that are connected to aspects of God that are especially involved in the vital realm of nature spirits, such as Cernunnos, Pan, even Dionysos, Pashupati. So even Ganapati. So these sorts of beings are very closely connected to nature spirits. So anything involving their names, like the Hecatomai or associated prayers for these other deities, is often going to actually attract the higher level of beings, the higher level of nature spirits, sometimes even more technically more advanced than humans. And you can gain a lot of benefit from their company. And those are the beings where, like, you'll be chanting your mantra or something and you'll stop, and you'll hear that out in the woods or, you know, in the sky, you'll hear the mantra continuing to be sung by a chorus of beings. And that's these nature spirits being attracted by the particular nature of the prayer. Yeah, that Ketonomai is perfectly fine for that. And again, you can always invite them to come and worship with you. Guilherme asks, could you talk a bit about the myth of the golem? Can spirits be magnetized to such constructs and interact through them? Yes, spirits can be condensed. Spirits can be condensed and given sufficient energy by the magician, not necessarily of their own accord, but can be given enough energy by the magician to actually function through physical objects. It's very rare. It requires quite extraordinary magical skill, but history testifies that it's been done quite a number of times. Chris asks, are hive-minded creatures typically one spirit? Yes, hive-minded creatures are always one spirit, not individual spirits. And in which case, it's a matter of like their hive. You know, it's like there'll be one spirit for that hive or that connected ant hill, whatever the case is. Pablo says, are there specific spirits that would be the lords who preside over lush gardens? There are, but it's going to be different in your area. So again, just invite the spirits of your area to come and play in your garden. Make little offerings to them sometimes. Leave a stick of incense out for them. And you'll see the difference. William says, should I use the Apache names for the mountain near me and its spirits? Or would the spirits be like, you're not Apache, you're toast? I would use the Apache names. I might get some interesting responses from them. I like playing with stuff like that. Is it possible to contact extraterrestrial spirits? Let's not worry about them for now. And Paul asks, I want to hear that answer. Oh. But I'm imagining you turning into a piece of buttered toast for saying some Apache names and immediately landing on the ground. So no. All right. So those are all the questions thus far. So yeah, so that covers banishing, treasure offerings, offerings to the local lords, simple offerings to the forest lord, which is always the largest, oldest tree. It's also usually a particular kind of tree that was native to that forest in a bygone era. So it'll often stand out for being a different species of tree. So we covered that, how to do that with houses also, inviting spirits into the garden, banishings. So quite a bunch of different things we've covered between the questions and what I originally set out to say. So all right, I think with that, we will wrap up the class for tonight. In terms of just kind of general announcements, via Herbal Elements, we will be offering, well, for one, I'll be doing this probably once a month, something like this, a by request one evening class. Rayanthe is going to be teaching women's alchemy and a process associated with different traditions called soul retrieval, or recollection of your personal energy that you leave everywhere when you go do stuff. So she'll be teaching classes on how to regather that for kind of putting yourself back together, regaining your focus and your discipline, and gathering your energy and your mind back together. So that's part of a practice she calls soul retrieval. She'll be teaching that and women's alchemy for female students who are interested in learning about the unique kind of specific path that women can take to use their own very unique biology in order to cultivate the internal alchemy, the fire-water connection, and eventually things like the body of light. How women have some unique tools to bring into the path with that. So Bridget's decided to start teaching some of those things now, so you can find out more information about that through the Herbal Elements website. Sometime around the end of summer, maybe August or July, we will be offering a next round, probably 7 or 8 Parad necklaces, alchemical mercury necklaces. So anybody interested in those is welcome. Just kind of keep an eye on the website, keep an eye on Facebook. We will announce it plenty ahead of time. You'll know as long as you try to stay informed. We'll announce plenty ahead of time before we start offering alchemical mercury products again. But sometime around the end of this summer, it'll be 8 necklaces or so that we offer again. And then after that, probably won't be for a while. This will be the kind of last chance for people to grab one, probably for quite some time. So yeah, look into those, stay abreast, look at Facebook. I'm active in the Slack chat periodically, so you can always catch me there and ask me. And if you enjoyed tonight's lecture, please, there's a donation link in the description for this video. And even if it's just $1 or $5, even if you can only give $900 or $1,000, go ahead and click it. And if you can, spare a small donation. That really helps me support my cave time, my cave sadhana that I'm doing, my retreat and meditation. So I thank you all very much. God bless. I hope you all enjoyed the class, and I will see you again next time.